already exist in Hollywood and cartoons in general? Thank you.
Well, to your first question, certainly when we began making the movie 6 years ago, it was a very different political climate and world climate than we find ourselves in now as we're releasing Coco. That being said, we're all very proud of the film, and I think it's a good thing that it's coming out now. There's been a lot of negativity in the world as of late, and there's been a lot of negativity in the world as of late, and we're honored to be bringing hopefully some much needed positivity into the world, especially when it comes to Mexico. You know, we've spent the last 6 years making this film, traveling down to Mexico, learning to love the country, love the people, and we've tried to inject as much of that love and passion into the film that we've made. And we think that it will be a good thing for the world, and hopefully help divide some of the and dissolve some of the lines that have been drawn between us all.
And hopefully when people watch our film, they'll see this beautiful family, a big adventure, gorgeous environments, and realize that in every way all of us are more alike than we are different.
From the from the standpoint of you know, we can only speak to animation because at Pixar that's the medium that we work in. But this film in particular, you know, I think we all embraced it as a real opportunity to feature the talent that is in the Latino community, both from the standpoint of the actors and actresses who do an incredible job bringing this film to life, and also, you know, behind the camera. We worked a lot with artists from Mexico, Mexican American or Latino backgrounds, to design the characters, to design the world, to build these worlds in the computer. In addition to teaming up with cultural consultants, because as we're developing the story, you know, at Pixar we are very, we've had a lot of practice kind of cracking story problems and developing narratives, but we really needed to depend on, you know, the experts in the field of Mexican culture. You know, I'm Mexican American myself, but I can't say that I'm an expert in, you know, Mexican history or Mexican music. But with our consultants, we were able to find those resources and really say, in this story, what can we go to show off the beauty, show off the things that are really deeply rooted in the culture, and do a just representation on screen.
And to the last part of your question, when we first decided to make this film and tell a story set against this very real culture, we knew immediately that we had a huge responsibility to be accurate and to be respectful and to never lapse into cliche or stereotype. And from day one, 6 years ago, we have spent every single day doing everything we can to ensure that we don't do that.
Gracias. ¿Por dónde, por favor?
Hi, I'm Johnny Carmona. I'm just a simple boy with a dream. I'm a huge Disney fan. Speaking about the accuracy of Mexican culture, sometimes for a lot of people, me included, Frida Kahlo is overrated. So I love the way in the movies portrayed it, because all the scene about the papaya and stuff, I was laughing because it's very accurate about being overrated. How do you feel about working with this huge, not only Mexican, but like global culture icon like Frida Kahlo?
Mm-hmm. I don't know that I would want to attribute, you know, understanding that Frida Kahlo is a huge icon, and as such, people have very strong feelings about her. What we really wanted to lean into in this film, especially in the context of Miguel, who is this artist who doesn't really have, he's got this passion, he's got this talent, but he doesn't necessarily know the pathway to pursuing it. And we thought, in this realm where you have the opportunity to meet all of the people who came before you, all of the artists who came before you, we thought this is a perfect opportunity to give Miguel examples of people who use their art to affect the world around them. Amongst them, our Frida Kahlo, you've got, Jorge Negrete and Pedro Infante, and chief among them for our story is this fictional character Ernesto de la Cruz, and we just thought there's such a breadth of incredible Mexican talent from history that we wanted to lean into it in a lighthearted way to just really explore what it means to use your talent to change the world, and hopefully people find it engaging and entertaining.
And I love that throughout this film we have these strong, unique, complicated, iconoclastic women throughout the film, and Frida's one of them for me. And I think that is just a great, wonderful, beautiful thread that runs throughout Coco.
Gracias. Adelante.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Eduardo González, el Grupo Asir, bienvenidos a México. Siempre que hacen este tipo de películas animadas en Pixar, en Disney, son como muy cuidadosos de no hacerlas muy locales. Aquí es una película totalmente mexicana, pero ¿qué encontraron para poder exportar a otros países, para que la conciban también igual que nosotros la estamos viendo, con ese amor, ¿no? que están expresando por ser nuestra cultura, pero que en otros países también lo puedan concebir así?
It's certainly something we thought about when we first decided to make the film. It is a very culturally specific film, and we had never done a culturally specific film at Pixar before. But early on, as we researched Dia de Muertos and really grew to appreciate and understand the depths of the traditions, it became clear to us how important family, the idea of family, was to the celebration. And the more we understood how important family was, and the notion of the obligation that we have to remember our loved ones and pass along their stories to the next generation, and to make sure that they're never forgotten, we realized that that's a universal idea. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, we all have family. We all go through the ups and downs of dealing with our families, and so family is the center of the story that we're telling in Coco. So while, yes, the subject matter is culturally specific, the ideas are universal. And as we've begun to show the film around the world, it's become clear to us that people not only relate to the film because of those ideas of family, but we have found that there also is a great interest in learning about Mexican culture and an appreciation for everything that they do learn by watching the film and learning about what Dia de los Muertos is all about.
I think one of the most telling things as I've been working on this film is at Pixar we're a diverse studio in that we're a lot of artists and a lot of technical folk who come from many different countries, many different backgrounds. And in our very first screening, these films kind of develop over the course of years, but even in our very first screening, a lot of the elements that ended up in the final film were there. And seeing how the studio in its diversity was affected by the story, you could tell that as people in different departments were working on this film, they were putting an extra bit of effort, an extra bit of heart, an extra bit of work into everything that they were doing, and we began to discover, as people emailed us within the studio, that a lot of people at the studio were doing it because it meant something to a relationship that they had. It meant something to someone they loved, just working on this film that was about family, about remembrance, and a lot of them took it personally, and that was very telling to me that this was a story that had the power to affect anybody from any place, and I think you can see, think you can see how much heart all of the artists put into it because of that.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buen día. Mi nombre es Daniela del Río de Espectapop. Primero felicitarlos por la gran película. La verdad es que es un gran resultado para nosotros como mexicanos. Es un gran orgullo. Mi pregunta iría directamente hacia los niños. Yo sé que esta película es para todo el público en general, pero quisiera saber, ustedes, ¿cuál creen que sería el mensaje que los niños recibirían hoy en día? Porque las tradiciones y las costumbres mexicanas se están olvidando cada día un poco más en las nuevas generaciones. ¿Cuál es la respuesta que ustedes creen que los niños y estas nuevas generaciones tengan con respecto a esta película?
I think, that's one of the things that I think is particularly special about this film is this idea of the traditions being passed down generation to generation. And the fact that our main character is of the youngest generation, and he doesn't necessarily rebel against the traditions of Dia de Muertos, but he does rebel against this tradition of no music. And I think that kind of can sit as a surrogate of a situation where when you live in a multi-generational household, sometimes maybe you don't understand or appreciate when you're young the value of the traditions of your family or the value of that connection between generations. And so my hope is that when families go to see this film together, they have a way to communicate the meaning and the value and the tradition of these things that you pass on generation to generation, the stories, of people who came before you. One of the interesting things that we saw when we came to do research is the fact that Dia de Muertos means something different depending on where you are in life. When you're a kid, oftentimes you see kids in the cemetery and they're really bored and they don't know what to do with themselves and they're fidgeting. But as you grow older, as you become a parent, I'm sure as you become a grandparent or a great-grandparent, your relationship to those stories and to those people on the ofrenda and to the idea of passing down those traditions changes and becomes richer. And I think that comes from the responsibility of families to pass down those traditions.
On a side note, I just noticed all these years at Pixar, Lee and I have been there 25 years and been there since Toy Story, and always noticed how, it's my observation that we have these very kind of old-fashioned stories in a way and old-fashioned values juxtaposed against this very cutting-edge technology, which I just really love that, and I've always thought about these films kind of as, in an interesting way, kind of like the grandparents telling stories to the children, and that's just kind of one of my observations over the years.
De este lado, al fondo, Alejandra Sánchez. Me gustaría saber qué tan cierto es que en un principio querían ponerle a la película Día de Muertos y pues finalmente se terminó llamando Coco. ¿Por qué fue así?
What happened was very early on in the making of the film, oftentimes we don't have a title for a very long time, or we'll just work with a code name for the title. And this was very early on in the first year of making the movie. One of the ideas that was kicked around was to name the film Dia de los Muertos. And so as a result, we filed some paperwork to register that title, as you always do when you have a title for a film. And in this case, that proved to be a mistake that we didn't anticipate and that we regret and we apologize for. It was never our intention to try to trademark the holiday itself. It was always just about the title. That being said, it was painful for all of us that happened, and we felt terrible about it because, as I mentioned earlier, from the very beginning of this project, we tried to do everything we can to be respectful and to be, authentic in the story that we were telling. And of course, that ended up sending the complete opposite message that we were trying to send. But we did try to correct it as quickly as possible and apologize for what happened. And we ultimately moved on to what became, our actual title, which is Coco.
I think if anything good came out of that experience, it was just the fact that having worked with Lee and Darla and seeing the care that they were taking in the very early stages to be respectful, it only allowed the conversation about how much we needed to communicate with each other, with the broader company, and just be very, very thoughtful in all avenues about you know, making a film like this about, you know, a real culture, about a real celebration. And that helped us to just really open up the doors to conversation with our cultural consultants, with everyone at the studio about how do we take care to make sure that this is done completely respectfully.
And that every decision was made with sensitivity. And yeah, it's been great, and everyone has been on board with seeing things the way we came to see them.
Hi, I'm Regina Tiscareña from Radio Tinsburg. First of all, congratulations, it's an excellent movie. And okay, what is the reason and how was the process of making a Mexican movie that talks about our traditions?
Well, hopefully we've made it clear how important it was for us to, of course, be respectful. For me, for all of us, when we first came down to Mexico, and then for all the subsequent research trips that we came on when we traveled all over the country, we were in Morelia and Lake Tlaxparo and Oaxaca, Guanajuato, many different places. We tried to absorb as much of the culture as we could to have it infuse itself into the film that we were making. But the most important part of those trips for us was the time that we spent with families. I requested before we even left on those trips that they arranged for us to embed ourselves with different families of different backgrounds all over the country so that we could spend time with them just observing their day-to-day life. And then during Dia de Muertos, having those families share their traditions with us, feed us, walk us to the town cemeteries, proudly show us their family cemetery plots, tell us about their own families. And we did that again and again and again. Since we knew Miguel was going to be from a family of shoemakers, we visited families of shoemakers. We visited families that have all kinds of different livelihoods, making papel picado, making mezcal, making mole, alebrijes, and all that time that we spent slowly made its way into the film, not just visually, but in the story that we ended up telling.
From a personal standpoint, it was also, really exciting to me to be able to tell a story that was based on the Mexican culture. Every film that you make, it kind of becomes a master's degree in whatever you're working on, and as story artists.
I know a lot about cars.
As story artists, as directors and producers, we're on this film for 4 years and sometimes upwards of that. And so to be able to work on this film and kind of be steeped in my culture, call up my parents, ask about family stories, and find that the familial connection to a Pixar film, that's deeper than I've ever been able to go. And I think it helps to create a story that's unique for the studio, that is unique for the world, but for just strictly from a personal standpoint, I felt like, I'm very thankful for it because it's helped me to grow, to reconnect with my roots, and to create something that I'm very proud to share with my family in the United States and Mexico and beyond.
Hi, my name is Victor Vasquez from Comunicarla, and welcome to Mexico. First of all, this is a beautiful movie, and you have a great movie to show the world. But we know to make this movie, it was necessary a lot of investigation for a long time for the culture here in Mexico. But what kind of things is the most important for you in your personal experience of that investigation? What kind of things do you learn about all this investigation for free? Thank you.
I think the most important thing for us, like we mentioned earlier, is the families, really, is the people and all the people that we met and all the stories that they told and all the things that happened when we were hanging out with the families. All those tiny little details, little anecdotes, for our whole team, all the artists that were with all of these amazing, warm, generous, kind, and super fun families. All those tiny little details made its way into the film. And then, just traveling throughout this country and being so inspired by the beauty of the country and the architecture and the details, and trying to represent that in our film. All of those things, we hope, made a beautiful movie.
I remember when I was growing up, I grew up in a generation that saw Toy Story and Toy Story 2 in the theaters, and you wouldn't believe how many college students, when I got to college, still had their favorite toys because all of a sudden they felt guilty about throwing them away. Because, it's a film that really narrows in on this relationship between your childhood and what these symbols mean. And I think for this film, what I've walked away with, having experienced the storytelling, the celebration, the family, I think it's going to do the exact same thing for people, but with their families and with their family stories. And I think when people finish watching this film, they're going to think, I need to be a good steward of my history, and I need to know the stories of the people who came before me, because it matters. And that's what's so beautiful about Dia de Muertos is it's about this responsibility to be keepers of those memories.
One of the most impactful things that we learned that I don't think any of us knew before we went into this project, we learned about this notion of all of us being capable of dying multiple deaths. And we learned this from several people who taught us about the rich traditions of Dia de Muertos. We learned that we die the first time when our hearts stop. And we learned that we die kind of a second time when we're buried, when nobody can see us any longer. But then we learned that we're all capable of dying this third and final death when there's nobody left in the living world who remembers us. There's nobody left who knew us, who can pass down our stories. And that, to us, had just an enormous impact. It was just such a powerful notion that we knew we needed to make it part of our film. And that notion, for those of you who haven't seen the film yet, is part of the bedrock of the story that we tell. And personally, for all of us, it's made us think, and it's given a lot more urgency to us to make sure that our loved ones are remembered. I have photo albums full of people that I don't really know, and I know that my parents know them, and that if I don't take the time to talk to them about those people and get their stories, that when my parents are no longer here, those people will all be forgotten. And so, as Adrian said, we're really hoping that people who see this film are ignited with a new urgency to learn their family stories and pass them along.
Hi, morning. Mim Silva from Pantalla Total. And my question is, after all the research that you did, how would you describe the death now? And are you going to take some Mexican traditions to your own life, or would you like to?
Well, I do know that all three of us have been building ofrendas at home now. And John Lasseter has been for a number of years as well. And we actually build a large ofrenda at Pixar. For the second year now, we've built an enormous ofrenda in the lobby of Pixar, and we've invited everyone in the company to bring in photos of their loved ones to place atop the ofrenda. So it definitely has become a part of the culture at Pixar. What was the first part of your question? Oh, how do we see the dead now?
For me, it really is Dia de Muertos. It's this celebration that comes around once a year. But like I said, we've been working on this film. You guys have been on it for 6 years. I've been on it for 4.5 years, and so we've kind of been living in this realm every day. It's been really good for me just in terms of recognizing the fact that connection with the people you loved doesn't end at death. That however you look at it, whatever you believe, just the very fact that you hold their stories in your heart and you keep the meaning that they had in your life close to you is, in a sense, them living on. And so that's been something that's been very helpful for me, just in terms of thinking about that relationship in a way that is everlasting.
We're very grateful for this optimistic view about the celebration of life, family reunion and connection. We're very grateful to have been living in this world for the last several years, and so we thank you for that.
I was very close to my grandmother growing up, and she was always very supportive of my creative aspirations. She was always the one to drive me long distances for play rehearsals, to take me to art lessons. It was, my grandma did everything she could because my mother was working. And unfortunately, she passed away while I was making the first Toy Story film, so she never got to see anything that I've done creatively, professionally in my life. And despite that, I've always felt that she's here with me, and anytime I've hit a milestone in my career, I felt that she's there with me. When I won an Academy Award, I looked up and thanked her at that moment. And so diving into this world, diving into these traditions of Dia de los Muertos really cemented for me that notion that my grandmother is coming back. She is seeing what I'm doing with my life. I do still feel her love.
Hola, buenos días. Lucero Calderón del periódico Excelsior. Tengo dos preguntas, no sé quién me quiera responder. Una es si, con base en toda esta investigación que realizaron, todo lo que aprendieron, lo que ya han integrado a su vida, ¿consideran que este tipo de tradición, el Día de Muertos, puede unir naciones o puede unir seres humanos o dos países tan diversos y a la vez tan comunes y tan cercanos como Estados Unidos, México? Y la segunda, ¿qué opinión tienen acerca de presentar el día de hoy Coco en Bellas Artes, que es un recinto muy importante en México, y eso de ayudar obviamente a los niños jóvenes que toman clases de música en esta región de Oaxaca, ayudarles con instrumentos? ¿Por qué decidieron hacerlo de esta manera? ¿Por qué a ellos? ¿Por qué con instrumentos? En fin, gracias.
Well, we could answer the second part first and then go back around. We have to have better memories. So, to answer the second part of the question, we are so honored to be able to premiere the film at the Palacio de Bellas Artes. It's such a prestigious institution, and to be able to I think it's such a wonderful way to celebrate, all the things we have learned, to celebrate the art and the culture, I'm remembering the first part of the question, and as this way to just represent to the world the beauty of the celebration that comes from Mexico. All of our hope is at Pixar we always seek to make a film that has the ability to touch people all across the world. And I think there's something to be really proud about here in Mexico, the fact that this is a tradition that is meant to unite people and to reunite people. And I hope that the spirit of it is embraced by the world, is embraced by neighbors, is embraced by families. Yes.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I've always felt that the quickest way to kind of break down barriers, walls between us, is to tell stories, and tell stories that engender empathy for the characters in the story. When we empathize with characters, we stop thinking of them as being different than ourselves, and we start to see them as being like ourselves. And we hope that by telling this story that hopefully people empathize with, they will just see this as a universal story and not telling a story about someone different than themselves.
And then, we're super excited about being at Bellas, very honored, extraordinarily honored and very excited to be at Bellas Artes. Everybody, when we first started this film, this is a dream come true for all of the community at Pixar and our cultural consultants. Everybody was hoping that this might be the outcome, and here we are today.
To bring it to Mexico
first.